here is essentially a Geddes gravel. It's a gravel deposited by the Geddes River, and then overlying it here we have what is essentially a Ulabe-derived river, so a river coming not from, in this case, the east flowing west, but actually a river flowing north to south. And we know this not only from the provenance, of course, the lithology, but also from the irrigation. So we've got this change. But we're not going to be concerned with these limestone rivers. We're going to be concerned largely with the Geddes River for now, at least in this talk. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video just to show you what these sequences look like. Now GT stands for Geddes Terrace, and it tells us that we have in here Geddes gravels at a certain height, and as we move across this sequence we're going to lose height, and we're going to have gravels at changing heights, lower heights, progressively lower heights. As we move through the video, we're going to move down this river terrace staircase. So hopefully, as we start to pan, this video will give you a sense of what these deposits look like. Thankfully now, because we have access to drones, this was incredibly difficult 20 years ago. We actually had to physically walk up to these sites, which I can assure you, even for me 20 years ago, was quite challenging. Would be impossible for me now. But using the drone, we can get in quite close, and we can get some really nice views of this sequence as we pan essentially from north to south as we move down the Geddes River Terrace staircase. So now we can see a slightly lower Geddes gravel, GT8. Just move my pointer out of the way. We're still coming south. Now you can see on the surface there that we're dropping down. I'm going to drop the drone down in a moment to make it possible, but it shows you some idea of how we're losing height as we move down this video. You can see in there GT7 gravels, and then these really thick and extensive GT6 gravels here at a lower level. So we step down again to the lower terrace, and as we pan further south still, we're going to get progressively lower still until we get to GT5 in the corner here. GT4 is not exposed. You can't see it in the video. You can actually see it if you go on the ground. But what is exposed is GT3 right down at the bottom there. And you can just see the Geddes Valley, the modern Geddes Valley, off to the right there. The other side of that particular promontory, we can see, just to show you the gravels again. So this is terrace 6 down to terrace 5. We can see them exposed at the other side as well, and we can trace them across the plateau. We've done that across the Three Plateau, and we can, using just standard altitudinal correlation and knowing roughly what the gradients or what we believe the gradients to be, we can end up by correlating these outcrops of gravel to give us these nice longitudinal profiles of the particular terraces. So we started on GT9 in that video, and we went right down to GT3 here on this western side of the Bogas Plateau. We get similar deposits on the eastern side of Sarnach, and we even get some deposits, not as many, down here on the eastern side of the Ibram-Mahaga Plateau. Prior to volcanism, it might have looked a bit like this. There's the river, cheating a bit here, but showing you the terraces, how they might have looked prior to being buried by lava and being capped by lava and therefore preserved by the lava. So we have this staircase stepping down on these progressive lower floodplains as the river incisors in response to the uplift, or relative uplift at least, to the Alashir Grollen. What about time? How long does it take to do this? What time is represented by this record? Well, fortunately, of course, the lava flows are great for doing geochronology. So we have a direct link between the lavas and some of these floodplains. So some of the lavas stop at certain levels. which tells us that they are contemporary with that level, and so we can start to build up a picture of the ages of these terraces based upon the ages of the lava flows that cover them. And we don't only have age estimation through argon age estimation, but we also have a little bit of paleomagnetism to help us as well. If you look at the data, again, it's too quick, you don't need to take this in, other than the fact you can see that the vast majority of those data points across those three plateaux lie at the oldest at about 1.3 million, coming right through to about 1 million. So they represent about 300,000 years, but they don't start until Geddes Terrace 6. There's no volcanism before Geddes Terrace 6. So 6 through to 1 certainly comes within this period. Prior to GT6 is older than 1.3 million. And these argon age estimates are supported by the reversed paleomagnetic time scale. And we can put together, as we did in this paper in 2017, we can put the terraces here, GT11 right to GT1 here, interacting with the lava flows of known or age based upon their argon age estimates, and then we can correlate them with our master sequence. I'll come back to this in a moment, the marine isotope stage record from the deep oceans, to give us an idea of where this sequence fits in a much more broader context. And it's that broader context that allows us to talk about some of the controls other than the structural controls, because we've got a lot of other things going on during this time period, not least of which is climate change. So this diagram, which might take a while to get your head around, is essentially just showing you a multi-proxy record. So here are the terraces and their heights. Here their relative heights and ages based upon our independent age estimates. And then above it we have a stabilized record from the Eastern Mediterranean Basin. So this is ODP 967, and we have our master chronology, if you like, the Lasikian Remo LRO4 stack here, with the glacial and interglacial cycles again shown by the delta RT signature. And then at the top we have the percentage arboreal pollen, the tree pollen, from the site in northeastern Greece, from Tanagi Philippon. And it shows the relationship between the terraces, or apparent relationship between the terraces, the terracing, and the frequency of climate change in this period prior to 1.3 million here, particularly so GT6 is when we thought the volcanism started. These are the higher terraces, which seem to be roughly in synchrony with the glacial and glacial cycles, which suggests these are obliquity-driven cycles, they're tilt-driven cycles from the early Pleistocene, which seems to suggest that the water budgets of the river are being governed primarily at this time by the changing climate. So whether it's wetter or drier, depending on whether we're in a glacial or an interglacial. So that's what we thought. We thought we got a really nice sequence that demonstrated the onset of volcanism around 1.3 million, and this was, if you like, blanketing a pre-existing landscape, an incised landscape that has formed slightly before that, perhaps during the very earliest part of the Quaternary, perhaps starting around 2 million years ago, when we know there's accelerated change in the Alashiya Graben, for instance. The problem is that we got some new data and things start to look a bit different. What we hadn't considered when we were looking at the fluvial sequence is another part of the fluvial record, and that's the travertines. The travertines have formed, these are hot water springs, formed along fault lines, if you like, and they relate to subsurface drainage, they relate to changes in water circulation beneath the surface. But ultimately, of course, they're fed largely by their meteoric. They're fed by meteoric sources from the atmosphere, and so there is a relationship with what's going on in the climate outside. But what we were interested in is whether we could get age control from the travertines as well. The travertines seem to relate. We had this model published in 2020 in Geomorphology to creation along the fault lines. So they are related primarily either to the north, northeast, south, southwest oriented faults for the very older travertines, which I'll come to in a moment, or the young ones, which we're interested in most, which relate to the sequence on, say, the Ira-Mahaga Plateau, and which seem to relate to the east-west faulting. And therefore, they are relevant to the timescales. And it could be that the heating of the water at depth and the degassing of lava at depth gives us this super concentration of carbonates in the water, which when they're pressure released at the surface gives us these travertine deposits. So the travertines are related to the faulting. They're also related to the rise and fall of magma presumably from the mantle in this case, into which gives us, of course, these surface lava flows. The age control, though, gave us a few shocks. Down the bottom here, we have a travertine associated with a north-northeast, south-southwest oriented fault. But this travertine is about 300 meters beneath the level of the top of the Kula. So it falls in a landscape which is already incised into the Kula. And if we look at the age here from our preliminary lead date here, we can see an age of 12 million. We're still in the Miocene. We're in the Miocene, but the landscape is already heavily dissected. So this gave us a little pause for thought that our landscape, which we thought was largely the result of incision in certainly the Pliocene and early Pleistocene, actually might be a lot older than we thought. And we might have to have a rethink about the timescales of landscape evolution. We do have travertines like the one at the top here, which sits on a river terrace and develops on top of a river terrace in that same sequence, a little downstream of Ira-Mahaga, around just north of the village south of the village of Palankaya. And this is the Palankaya mound, and we can see here an age of 1.2 million. So this fits, if you like, with our existing model, and incision into landscape in our existing model. But there is a hint that this landscape may actually have already been deeply incised prior to the deposition of our river terrace sequence. We also make the assumption that the faulting, the east-west faulting, was contemporaneous with the earliest volcanism known at that time. And we had this 1.3 million year age. So here we have an ice fault here, and we have volcanic clastic debris burying this fault very quickly. This is very fresh, which suggests that the faulting is very close in time to the volcanism. And this is very close to our lava flows, which were dated at 1.3 million. So we assumed that this burial was probably associated with the 1.3 million year flow, and therefore we had faulting in the early Pleistocene. We may still have a faulting in the early Pleistocene, but again, we now have a new set of data which suggests perhaps we might have underestimated or misinterpreted the age of this faulting. So from the Salihli Plateau, we have travertines, and sitting on these travertines are basalts. Every single lava flow that we had an age estimate on from the Ira-Mahaga Plateau, nothing was older than 1.3 million until this year. And our age estimates now from this site at Bushak on the Ira-Mahaga Plateau is we have a lava flow here dated at around 5 million. This is all still unpublished. And we have a lava flow on top of that at 2.36 million. So this one's Quaternary, this one's Pliocene. So again, we're down here on the top of the plateau. We're well incised into the Ulabe, below the level of the Ulabe, into the Armetla, and we have a landscape onto which a lava flow can be extruded, and that landscape, which has travertine in it, is already, so there's a hot water spring down here, at the surface, it's already at this level 5 million years ago. It gets worse. I'm standing here on that travertine, looking at a basalt just to the north. And that basalt has yielded an age of 13 million. So just like the travertine at 12 million on the north-northeast, south-southwest oriented faults, it seems we've actually got basaltic lava flows coming as early as the late Miocene, which suggests this landscape is deeply incised even before, long before, even the Pliocene begins, completely changing our view of the time scales of evolution of this fluvial system. So to wrap up, where are we? We've got new data, widely different ages. Lava flows 13 million right through to 1 million, all at the same height, all right next to each other, all suggesting a landscape which is already deeply incised in the late Miocene, and actually doesn't really go very far at all between 13 million and 1 million. There's actually not that much incision. Most of it's done, well, certainly, maybe aerially is bigger, but certainly the amount of incision where the river is, it's already at that level in the late Miocene. This gives us really big problems because we can no longer use the basalt or the presence of basalt as a marker for time, because now we've got basalts going back into the late Miocene. So every time we find a basalt now, we don't know what age it is until we do an age estimate, because they're so greatly different. I don't think this changes the age of GT6 because we've got direct basalt age estimates for that terrace. But implications it has for GT7 to 11, well, that's another matter. It still looks like they're driven by those cycles, but perhaps we're not quite as certain as we once were. And we have these travertines, which also go back to the late Miocene. And even the middle Miocene, I guess at 13 million. And these have huge implications for the landscape and the evolution of the fluvial landscape at this time. There's only one way for us to move forward, and that's to do more field work, to make more observations for Seda, Tunja, and those that follow, to make more observations, to do more geochronology, to try and decipher this amazing sequence. But what is clear is that wherever we look, we find new data. Wherever we look, we find new surprises. This is a remarkable record, and as I started, I will finish. It has been a privilege to work on it. Thank you.
Sayın Valim, kıymetli katılımcılar, medya konuşmalarından dolayı çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Birinci oturumlarımız, oturum başkanlarının yönetiminde içinde bulunduğumuz A salonu ve bir alt kattaki B salonunda icra edilecektir. Teşekkür ederiz.